My name is Elena Morgan, and on the night of my wedding, only 6 hours after saying I do, I found myself lying flat on my stomach on bed, hotel bed, while still wearing my wedding dress. I had slipped under there to play a silly joke on my new husband, Darius Hale, a harmless moment. A young woman teasing the man she had just promised a lifetime to, but that moment turned into something completely different, something that changed the direction of my entire life. The carpet smelled like old cologne and dust, my veil kept sticking to my face, and the lace on my sleeves scratched my skin every time I moved an inch. But all of that disappeared the second the door opened and I heard footsteps that did not belong to Darius. It was his mother, Lorraine Hale. Her heels clicked across the floor, sharp and irritated. She started talking on the phone without lowering her voice, the way someone does when they are certain they are alone. I remember pressing my hand against my mouth because I felt something heavy rising in my chest, a warning I could not explain yet. Lorraine laughed softly, a short cold sound, and said, "He has no idea she is not as clueless as she looks. The condo will be ours in less than a year. She thinks he loves her. She really does." My heart stopped. My breath froze. I could not move. She kept going. "Darius only needs to stay married long enough to make the division of assets look natural. After that, we file for divorce and take what is valuable. The girl is attached. It will be easy." In that hidden space under the bed, surrounded by dust and my own disbelief, I realized the truth. My marriage was not a mistake. It was a trap. And I knew in that moment that nothing in my life would ever be the same again. Long before that night under the bed, there had been hints. Looking back now, I can trace every red flag, every small moment where something inside me whispered that Darius Hale was not the man he pretended to be. But love has a way of making you adjust your vision, soften sharp edges, and overlook the things you should have questioned. I met Darius at a charity event downtown. He was charming in a polished kind of way, the kind of man who knew exactly when to smile and exactly how to make a woman feel chosen. I mistook that skill for sincerity. He had this smooth way of talking about the future, but whenever I tried to talk about mine, he redirected the conversation. I never understood why. His mother, Lorraine, was the first real warning. She inspected me the day we met, not with curiosity but with calculation. Her eyes went straight to my shoes, my watch, the subtle things that said more about my life than my words ever could. She asked about my job, my father, my living arrangements, almost as if she were collecting data. Darius also had a habit of acting like he was doing me a favor by being with me. It was subtle, but it chipped away at my confidence without me realizing it. He often insisted on handling my finances, saying it was easier if he organized everything. I thought it was his way of being supportive. I did not see the pattern forming. All of these moments floated back to me as I hid under that bed, signs I ignored, warnings I brushed aside, and now they finally made sense. The longer I stayed under that bed, the more the world I thought I was building with Darius began to crumble piece by piece. I had entered that room as a wife, glowing with anticipation, believing I was stepping into a new chapter. But in the span of a few minutes, the foundation of that future cracked so loudly inside my mind it felt like the room itself tilted. Lorraine continued pacing, her voice slicing through the silence. She complained about the hotel room, about the decorations, even about the wedding guests. But then her tone shifted, becoming colder, calculated. She said, "I told him from the start that girl was his easiest ticket. Her father practically hands her everything. Darius better not mess this up." I could feel my pulse pounding against the floor. My father, Caleb Morgan, had saved for decades to buy me the condo I lived in before the wedding. It was his way of giving me independence. I had never imagined someone would look at it as a prize to steal. Lorraine kept talking, her words becoming sharper. "Once the condo is secured and the marriage lasts long enough to look legitimate, we can start the divorce process. I want that property handled fast. She is too trusting. She will sign anything if she thinks it is for the marriage." Trusting. I had always considered it a strength. That night it felt like a weakness wrapped around my throat. Just when I thought it could not get worse, the door clicked again. Another pair of footsteps entered. I knew immediately it was Darius. The shift in the air was unmistakable. He greeted his mother with a quiet sigh, the kind of sigh someone makes when they are exhausted from pretending. "Did you tell her anything?" he asked. "Of course not," Lorraine replied. "She is under the impression she married a devoted man. But we need to stay focused. The condo transfer has to look voluntary." My stomach twisted so painfully I had to clench my fists to keep from reacting. Darius said, "She is attached to me. She trusts me completely. I give it 8 months, maybe less. After that I can file without looking suspicious. She will not fight back. Women like her never do." Women like her. Women like me. Their words carved themselves into my memory, each sentence a cut. Under that bed, surrounded by shadows and the remnants of my wedding day, I understood something I had never expected to learn on the first night of my marriage. I was not loved. I was targeted. And they believed I would break easily. They had no idea who I truly was. When the door finally closed and their voices faded down the hallway, I stayed under the bed for a long time. Not because I was scared, but because I needed to breathe without letting the storm inside me spill out. Anger and heartbreak were fighting for space in my chest, but something stronger pushed through. Clarity. I slid out from under the bed, brushing dust from my dress, and walked to the mirror. My face looked pale, almost unfamiliar, but my eyes were steady. I whispered to myself, "You are not going to fall apart. Not for them." Instead of crying, I reached for my phone. The first person I called was my father, Caleb Morgan. He answered on the first ring, even though it was late. He could always hear when something was wrong in the tone of my breathing. I told him everything, my words shaking only once. He listened quietly, then said one sentence that grounded me. "If someone tries to take from you, Elena, do not let them think they chose the wrong target. Show them they misjudged you." That was all I needed. I changed out of my wedding gown, folded it carefully, and set it on the chair. Then I opened my laptop and started pulling together documents. Property records, bank statements, email exchanges where Darius convinced me to let him manage certain accounts. Every detail I had ignored before now became part of a larger picture. The next call I made was to my best friend, Sienna Brooks, an attorney who had seen more messy divorces than anyone should. She did not gasp or panic. She simply said, "Come to my office first thing in the morning. Do not sign anything, do not confront him yet." Do not confront him. That was important. Let them believe I was still the quiet, trusting woman they could manipulate. Let them think everything was going according to their plan. Because behind that calm silence, a very different plan was already forming, and this time I would not be the one caught off guard. The next morning I left the hotel before Darius even woke up. I told him I needed fresh air and wanted to grab breakfast, and he did not question it. He kissed my forehead like a devoted husband, completely unaware that his entire script was already unraveling. I drove straight to Sienna's office. She had coffee waiting and a legal pad open, ready to map out every angle. As I replayed everything I heard beneath the bed, she wrote quickly, her expression sharpening with every detail. "This was not just a bad marriage," she said. "This was premeditated financial manipulation. That matters in court." Hearing those words made something inside me settle. This was not my imagination. It was not an overreaction. It was a crime hidden behind wedding vows. Sienna outlined the first step. I needed evidence, not suspicion, not hurt feelings. Proof. So I began collecting it. I started small. Over the next several days I let Darius talk. He loved talking when he thought he was in control. I asked careful questions about our future plans, our finances, the condo. Each time he answered, tiny cracks appeared in his lies. One evening, as we sat on the couch, Darius bragged about being good at managing assets. He said, "When we transfer the condo, it will make more sense tax-wise. You will thank me one day." I recorded that conversation. Another day, he spoke to one of his friends on speakerphone, unaware I was in the next room. He joked, 8 months in and I walk out with a condo, easiest win of my life. I recorded that too. With every clip, every screenshot, every email he forwarded me without thinking, I built a file thick enough to expose the truth. Meanwhile, my father, Caleb, quietly transferred several business assets into secure trusts under my name, making sure no one could touch them, his way of silently standing behind me. By the end of the week, Sienna looked at the folder of evidence and nodded. "This is enough. More than enough." And for the first time since my wedding night, I felt my breath return to my body. I was not powerless. And they were no longer ahead of me. Sienna told me something that stayed with me for days. The best revenge is not rage. It is clarity. Let them expose themselves while you stand steady. So instead of confronting Darius in anger, I invited him and his mother to dinner the following week. Lorraine accepted immediately. Darius hesitated, probably sensing my tone was different, but he still agreed. They both believed they had already won. They thought I was still the trusting wife too blinded by love to notice anything. That illusion was the most powerful tool I had. I cooked dinner myself, deliberately choosing a menu Lorraine would find unimpressive. She liked to complain. The more off balance she felt, the easier it would be to rattle her. When they arrived, Lorraine made a face at the table setting, then whispered to Darius loudly enough for me to hear, "She is trying, but this looks cheap." I smiled and pretended I had not heard a thing. We sat down. Darius poured wine, acting like the perfect husband in front of his mother. But underneath the act, I saw the cracks that had become clear to me over the past week. His eyes darted around too much. His smile did not reach his eyes. When the last plate was served, I excused myself and said I needed to grab something from the bedroom. I did not return with dessert. I returned with a small Bluetooth speaker. Lorraine raised an eyebrow. Darius stiffened. I placed the speaker on the table, pressed a button, and stepped back. Their voices filled the room. Clear, sharp, impossible to deny. First came Lorraine's phone call from the hotel room. The lines about using me, the plan to take the condo, the timeline of the divorce. Then came Darius's bragging to his friend about walking away with my property. Every cruel sentence they thought I would never hear echoed against the walls of my home. Lorraine's face drained of color. Darius's jaw locked tight, anger and panic fighting for control inside him. I let the recording finish before I spoke. I said, "This is the life you planned for me, a marriage built on lies, a future built on theft. You thought I would never know. You thought I would never fight back." Darius tried to stand, but Sienna stepped into the room. She had been waiting in the hallway until the moment was right. She placed a thick folder onto the table and said calmly, "We already filed the motion. Attempted asset manipulation, pre-divorce financial planning, fraud, your signatures are all recorded." Lorraine gripped the edge of the table. Darius glared at me like I had betrayed him, even though he had betrayed me first. I looked at him and said, "No one stole anything from you, you never had it to begin with." Then I walked to the door, opened it, and pointed outside. "This marriage ends tonight, you leave now." Darius hesitated for a second, then stormed out. Lorraine followed, shaking with fury and humiliation. And when the door shut behind them, I felt something I had not felt in weeks. Peace. For the first time, the house belonged to me again. The night Darius and Lorraine walked out of my home, I expected to feel shattered. I expected to collapse on the floor and let the weight of everything crush me. But instead, a strange calm settled over me. Not happiness, not relief, just a quiet understanding that the worst part was already behind me. The following morning I woke up early, made coffee, and sat by the window watching the sunrise. It felt like reclaiming something small but important. My space, my time, my peace. Sienna filed all the necessary paperwork within days. The evidence spoke for itself. Darius tried calling me at first. Then he tried blaming me. Then he tried apologizing. I ignored every attempt. There was nothing left to explain, nothing left to salvage. The truth had already destroyed the version of us that only existed in my imagination. My father, Caleb, visited often during those weeks. He never lectured me. He never said "I told you so." He simply fixed things around the condo, restocked my pantry, and made sure I ate real meals. His presence reminded me that not every man in the world was built to deceive. Slowly, I started to rebuild my life. I rearranged my home, donating furniture Darius insisted we buy. I reorganized my finances, secured my accounts, and updated every password and document. I even signed up for a pottery class, something I had always wanted to do. Piece by piece, I stitched myself back together. Not perfectly, not quickly, but honestly. And for the first time in a long time, I began to feel like myself again. Healing does not announce itself. It shows up quietly, sometimes in the form of a new routine, sometimes in the sound of your own laughter returning after months of silence. For me, it appeared the day I walked into a local design studio to inquire about renovating my condo. That is where I met Julian Carter. Julian was nothing like Darius. His presence did not fill the room with pressure. It softened it. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, his words carried a gentleness I had forgotten men could have. He asked about the style I wanted for my home, but somehow the conversation drifted to books, music, and the kind of childhood memories you only share when you feel safe. There was no rush, no overwhelming intensity, just a steady, warm connection that felt like sunlight after a long winter. Weeks later, after our meetings turned into casual lunches, and casual lunches turned into intentional time together, Julian admitted he looked forward to every excuse to see me. His honesty disarmed me. There were no games, no hidden agendas. He made it clear he wanted to be in my life, not for what I had but for who I was. Years passed and our bond deepened. We got married in a small ceremony on a hillside overlooking the ocean. No grand gestures, no staged perfection, just vows spoken with sincerity. We welcomed 3 children into the world: Arya, thoughtful and observant; Landon, bold and imaginative; and little Mila, whose laughter seemed to wrap the whole house in warmth. My home was no longer a place I needed to protect. It was a place that protected me. For the first time, love felt real, and this time it was mine. Life has a way of circling back to unfinished chapters. Mine returned on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, while I was folding laundry. My phone rang with a number I did not recognize. I almost ignored it, but something nudged me to answer. The voice on the other end belonged to a nurse. She asked if I knew a man named Darius Hale. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but with the kind of memory you feel rather than think about. The nurse explained that he had been in a serious car accident. He had lost a significant amount of blood. His blood type was rare. They needed a matching donor. I asked why they were calling me. Her answer landed like a quiet stone. "You are listed as the closest match." I sat down slowly, the laundry slipping from my hands. Darius and I had been strangers for years. I had rebuilt my life. I owed him nothing. Yet the thought of someone's life hanging in the balance weighed heavier than the wounds he left behind. Julian found me a few minutes later, and after I explained, he only said, "Go, help if you can. That is who you are." So I went. Not for Darius, but because compassion was never my weakness, it was my strength. And I refused to let him be the one to change that. I sat in the hospital waiting room while the nurses prepared everything. The scent of disinfectant, the hum of machines, the soft conversations drifting through the hallway all blended into a strange kind of stillness. When they finally called my name, I followed quietly, letting instinct guide me more than emotion. The process was quick. My blood was taken. The nurse thanked me. And just like that, the man who once tried to break me was given a chance to live. Before I left, the doctor asked if I wanted to see him. I hesitated, but curiosity nudged me forward. I stepped into the dim recovery room. Darius lay there, pale and bruised, nothing like the confident man who once believed he could control everything around him. His eyes opened slowly, and when he recognized me, they filled with something I had never seen in him before. Humility. He whispered, "Why would you help me after everything?" I stood at the foot of the bed and said the truth. Because your choices do not define mine, and because letting go is the only way I stay free. He nodded weakly, tears forming but not falling. For the first time, the distance between us felt honest. I did not stay long. I did not need to. As I walked out of that hospital, I felt no triumph, no regret, no lingering anger. Only closure. The kind that settles gently like dust after a long storm. Years later, when I look back at the girl hiding under that hotel bed, I no longer feel pity for her. I feel pride. She learned the hardest lesson in the harshest way, yet she refused to let betrayal turn her cold. She chose clarity over chaos, dignity over revenge, and growth over bitterness. My life now is built on honesty, love, and boundaries I protect fiercely. I learned that intuition is not a whisper to ignore, and kindness is not a weakness anyone can weaponize. Most importantly, I learned that walking away is not failure. Sometimes it is the first step toward freedom. If my story reached you today, if it reminded you of your own strength or your own turning point, I hope